In this world, is it possible to feel a sense of self-worth and happiness over a tragic story? Could it be a reminder of your own humanity that shows how far you've come and how things might not look as bleak as the tragic story you've experienced? At least it's true. That man has no full control, even over his own emotions. Berserk has been an enigma throughout my life. It's a story I've heard of countless times as a great example of dark storytelling. I love dark stories, but what makes me love them even more are those small moments of humanity, the calm before the storm. And Berserk is the epitome of that. For every horrifying imagery of death and destruction and loved ones being taken away, there's a moment of calm, a moment of happiness. Even small things like making music from blowing into a leaf can bring you so much joy, especially if it's with your best friend. Berserk is a dark fantasy about Guts, a swordsman who wanders the world looking for a purpose, and he's probably the most tragic character I've ever seen. The first arc is about him joining the Band of the Hawk. Why? Because their leader, Griffith, sees huge potential in him. And so, Guts leads Griffith's army, taking jobs by kings, and all to help Griffith's goal to become king himself one day. Guts is a man with the worst luck possible, but he somehow keeps on living. He has his happy moments. All his life he's been beaten, abused, and manipulated. The man was born from a hung woman. This man deserves to be happy, and that's all he wants. And even when things look bleak, he has his time to be happy. He fights because he needs a reason to stay alive. That's pretty much why he's always throwing himself into battle and always risking his life, so he could be on the edge and just stay alive and be alive. The themes of this series are both cynical and hopeful at the same time. How the fuck do you do that? Have you ever heard people say that 90% of everything is craft? Not just in terms of media, but in terms of life in general. Now, either you could mope and wallow on how life in the world is mostly filled with so much corruption and injustice, or you could value that 10% so much. In this harsh reality, even little things can hold close to you. That's pretty much why dark stories by, say, Zack Snyder kind of fall flat. They're like 98% bleak, not giving enough time to settle in with the moments where we see our characters there and be happy. You know, just showing that they have some humanity and they're not just blobs of fucking nothing. I mean, don't get me wrong, in Batman vs. Superman Ultimate Edition, Clark Kent is clearly shown to have been happy with his fiancée, but Batman? Man, that guy has lost his way. And I get that's the idea, but it's not my Batman, man. Guts, on the other hand, even seeing all this trauma, he still manages to stick his chin up. He's not blindly happy throughout his life, he just keeps going because all the man wants is to be alive. Hey, don't worry, this story doesn't just focus on Guts and Griffith. There are other characters that affect the main characters and vice versa to keep the story more interesting. Different perspectives of life that change each other's. There's a lot to take away from Berserk. It's not just a tragedy, it's also about being faced in life or death situations and being reminded that within all the death and violence, there's hope, there's happiness, even if things end up being worse than hell itself. When I say this story is a tragedy, I really mean it. As in, like, it makes you grow attached, and then the story will just rip your heart out. I mean, that is what a tragedy does, and it does it so goddamn well. Okay, so I'm gonna dip into spoiler territory, so if you want none of that, then please go invest yourself into Berserk. But where do you start? The best way to experience it is the manga. However, the 90s anime does a near spot-on adaptation of the manga while also having a mood that fits the whole aesthetics and moods and themes of the original manga so near perfectly. And then there are the 3 movies that condense the first arc. I personally think they're a pretty good starting point to ease into this story you've heard so much about. They skip some parts that the anime and manga go into much more detail over, but like I said, it's a good starting point. Just don't watch the 2016 anime. I know the manga author foresaw it and approves it, but apparently there are no real quiet moments like the aforementioned manga and anime have. In fact, it probably feels a lot more like a Zack Snyder film, if you catch my drift. I'll give it this, though. It has a great soundtrack.
境に悪だを食らう足く向く音で今日もの雨
But nothing can come close to the 90s anime soundtrack. Alright, so, spoiler time. Fuck Griffith. Absolute backstabbing monster who thinks he could save the world by wronging the people close to him. I think we all had a friend like Griffith before. Someone who leads you into a false sense of security, but once they're done with you, they throw you aside. And with Griffith's case, it's sacrificing his own Band of the Hawk to otherworldly demons for more power to save the world. And when I say things end up being worse than hell itself, I mean otherworldly monsters come up and destroy everything everyone holds dear, even the audience. And why? Because this dickbag made a deal with evil to achieve the goal of becoming king. All that blood, just for clout! Oh, but he's sacrificing only a few people just so he could save the rest of the world, because that is what good people do, because we gotta make sacrifices. Shut up! Shut up! This isn't even like Thanos where you can understand why he's doing it. Like, Griffith, like, could have easily not let his pride get the better of him, but he did. And now he is fucking evil, but he thinks he's doing good, and it's a really interesting character thing, don't get me wrong. It certainly opens the door for discussion, like, oh, is Griffith doing right? Because technically, like, that's good for discussion. This series is deep, man. And Griffith, for as piece of a shit as he is still a very complex character. And yet, despite witnessing the worst life has to offer, Guts still walks the earth. He survived. Sure, by a skeleton riding a horse, but he survived, and honestly, so can all of us. God, am I really gonna talk about the power of friendship? I mean, it's not an actual power, it's just what you can achieve if you have those who are willing to help you. Just cut toxic people from your life and keep on living with those who care about you. Just, make sure you know who's toxic and who's valid, because honestly, someone calling you out for being annoying isn't the same as, using you to kill people just to get ahead in life. Maybe I'm overthinking the themes of this story, but it really does feel like a lot of thought was put into the characters and themes. There's a scene where Guts has to kill someone, and that someone is training this kid so harshly, like how Guts was trained as a kid so harshly. That parallel had thought put into it, and it really does show even after Guts killed the kid by accident. That's very up to interpretation if you ask me. And now, here's an opinion from a friend who watched the 3 movies with me. Speaking as someone who isn't a Berserk fan, but can really see what the story was trying to achieve from watching these 3 movies. Take it away.
Hey y'all. So, Trent asked me if I'd like to watch the Berserk trilogy of movies with him. And when I think of Berserk, I think of a guy who used to comment on my videos back in 2013, who would beg me to check it out to the point where he started insulting my favorite anime, The Slayers, claiming that it makes that look like Care Bears, and even got to the point of calling the series nothing but filler. Word of advice, if you're trying to get somebody into something, don't attack something they love while doing it. So, the first 2 Berserk movies went by just fine. I loved the storyline and the dark fantasy feel to it. The 3rd movie, however, was very jarring once hell took over, and characters who I grew to love were being tortured by demons. It took me by surprise, to say the least. Then I thought about it for a little bit, and came to the conclusion that my overall interpretation of Berserk is how war and violence are so vile and evil that it all caused basically hell itself to take over, giving the characters a taste of what they've done to themselves and others. Moral of the story, make love, not war. So overall, Berserk is definitely a franchise that isn't for those who are easily depressed, as it's pretty much doom and gloom for a good majority of it. It harkens back to classic tragedy stories of Shakespeare, as well as subtle religious imagery and violence that the Bible made famous. While I will say it ain't my favorite piece of anime out there, it's very ambitious and unafraid to make viewers feel sick and uncomfortable. Also, Casca is bae. Keep in mind, this is based only on my watching of the movies, not the series or the manga, and I ain't going to protest to the idea of watching the show sometime in the future. I just need a little break from all this bloodshed and sadness. Looks like more Slayers for me for a while. What? Sometimes I like my Care Bears.
Berserk is a story that makes me want to be alive, and it makes me want to value my friendships and shred through life with them, showing it who's boss. Despite everything that has happened, especially in 2020, I'm still so happy to be alive and have my friends and family. Things may look bleak, but together, we will survive. So take care, and stay happy, everybody.
Looking back, the morning comes to find your face in your grass. Take the moonlight, by the tail to any side, just shouting. What is there? It's just the same what it's tried.